the knowledge that you are helping other people. So there's this perverse idea that not only
What's happening, fellas?
Mm,
Top of the day, boys.
How's it going?
I'm heavily sunburned, so
That's what happens when you
Nice.
do when you do roofing. Fuck all that.
yep, yeah. So I'm basically just like I'm hoping that my lighting situation and my not very good camera mitigates that so that you can't see my fucking like leprosy over here. So
We don't even do video at all, so you can just turn that off if you want. Both of you, actually.
you don't. I think you have a YouTube channel though.
Yeah, but it doesn't matter. Nobody's looking at it to like see us. They're just hearing. I don't know.
Well-
It really doesn't matter. I never have
Oh.
my camera on anyway.
Well, I've been
Speak
told
for yourself. They're here to see me.
Yeah, I've been told that'll be.
Well, I'm
different.
losing a shirt right now, so they're all. I'm too sexy for my shirt.
Well,
Too
yeah,
sexy
but
for my shirt.
you know what you should really do is you should consider yourself like part of the Free the Nipple movement and like do that live.
Yeah.
I'll just have like the cam like just close up on my nipple the whole
Yeah,
time.
you just like you bust out the nipple tassels so that you're like cheerleading the stream. So, yeah. So, conversation about yeah, you get it? AI, yeah, just different
Yeah.
pronunciations.
I got it. It wasn't
Not annoying.
yeah.
Huh.
Yeah, conversation, not a debate. Kind of about, I don't know how to phrase this at all, but like talking about consciousness as it pertains to AI, like is, I don't want to like blow the load right now, but
Yeah, especially
you know,
with your camera off.
Yeah.
save that for the Patreon.
Yeah. Be a good cam girl, Sec. Come on.
Yeah.
Get that video going.
But
All
yeah,
right, but what was the blow the load? What do you got?
Oh, well, like is fucking, because I got a whole spiel that I want to go into. I don't want to spoil the. What is AI
Okay,
even
save it, do it.
possible? Yeah.
Mhm.
So,
yeah.
yeah. Just the nature of the elite class, and then also consciousness as it pertains to AI, and then we can go into anything from there, but kind of around those topics. Where did Penguin go?
The Arctic.
Yeah. When the penguins attack.
Well, we can hold off till he's here, but yeah, like the general like gist of my response is going to be yes, and also it's really bad.
Yes. Yes, I know.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was interviewing this dude by the name of Ross Sewage, and he's the
Tasty.
bassist and vocalist from a band called Exhumed and another
Oh
band
yeah.
called Ghoul. Two like, death metal bands.
Yeah.
And he had never heard of David Graeber before, so I mentioned David Graeber to him, and I suggested Bullshit Job. So I've been doing David Graeber lectures all day now. So I've been really digging
He's
that.
in for a good time with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
he's one
you
of the
haven't
best.
heard? Yeah. Fuck, we lost a lot when we lost that guy.
Yep.
Yeah, isn't that like more like, I don't know, if I recall correctly, maybe Death Grind.
Yeah, Exhumed is more like, gore grind. And Ghoul is like, I don't know, a mishmash almost. There's like, they got some like more thrash metal songs, and then
Yeah, I've only listened to Exhumed. I'll listen to some Ghoul.
Ghoul's awesome. They've got some straight up like death metal songs, and then some more like old school thrash stuff, and but it's all very sort of like horror influenced.
Gotcha. So it's like the Exhumed, but like meets Misfits.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah. Or like more maybe meets DRI or something. Like old. But yeah, it's a kind of a super group, and they all like hide their faces. They're not, you don't know who they are, that kind of stuff. But
Yeah.
it's good. I go through phases with Ghoul where I'll binge them for like 3 days straight and just go through their whole discography. But
I do that with a lot of discographies, like, and especially since I made this rule because I don't want to be like unnecessarily prejudicial to any given artist. So if I find out I was wrong about them, I will literally, I have this rule and I hold myself to it that I will go through their entire discography and listen to everything they've ever put out because like if I was wrong about them, like if I talked shit and was wrong about them. So for instance, like I thought, and like, you know, we were just talking about metal, so this might be a throw curve, but like I thought Beyonce was like had like a writing team, a staff of people that were basically making her shit. And I never looked into it and I never cared to because it's Beyonce and I like, you know, it's not my normal jam. But basically I found out that I was full of shit and that the reason she was doing that was actually good for the industry. She was not like getting all this help writing her music. She was just listing the people on her album where she used samples from their stuff. And that was part of her like writing team. And so like basically I was assuming that they all like personally had a hand in writing her lyrics and shit and helping her compose. But no, she's actually just doing what basically everybody should do and listing the people who were partly responsible for the success of the album by listing those who she sampled, which is actually really fucking good and something that I hope other people do. So not only did I listen to her discography and found like many songs that I actually do like, but like I basically I flipped. Now I actually respect Beyonce more than some of the other people she's competing with because of that. Like I was full of shit before, and I believe firmly in repentance, even though I'm a filthy atheist now. Like so I went and repented of my sins of being wrong about Beyonce.
yeah, but she's in the Illuminati, bro. You know.
I mean, I think probably the Bavarians don't give much of a shit about her. I do think that she like was kind of shallow in her messaging at some points, like that whole thing where she just stood in front of an illuminated sign that said feminism or feminist or whatever. Like, if you're gonna do that, stand up for some women. Don't just be like, and like she had like this weird like vague speech about some of it, but she wasn't like doing anything to like directly stand up for women in that moment. So I mean,
Respect women.
yeah, maybe she's a feminist, but right now all she's doing is standing in front of a sign, really, and like saying some words.
I mean, I don't know her personally, but I would assume most pop artists are just going wherever the wind blows.
Maybe.
So whatever's popular at that time, you know. But
These days, I think, yeah.
I don't know.
I think she does care somewhat, you know, like I listened to Lemonade and that was like a pretty good album. And her latest album is just like pushing completely out of the norm because it's an entirely country album. You know, like she seems to actually have something like of a creative streak in her where she wants to do stuff she wants to do and she isn't just sold out. So I'm
Is
not
she
just
like
gonna
trying to
like
be
that.
Taylor Swift in reverse or something? Like what?
Well,
a country album? That's amazing.
Well, and it's a very like I mean, okay, I can't say really very good, but it's like it's perfectly fine like compared to like so many others and like actually has a sort of country flair to it. It seems like that the two most like common complaints about this album are A, I'm racist and I don't like black people, or B, I don't like that she swore. And anybody who thinks people from the South don't swear is fucking stupid. So, you know, I mean, it doesn't matter to me. Like, so, like, and actually, to me, that increases the flavor of it because I normally listen to music that's rather vulgar. So, you know,
I prefer Destiny's Child era Beyonce.
Bravo.
Way back.
Oh yeah.
Penguin's dating
Penguin is
himself.
not ready for this jelly. He is.
Well, we should all date ourselves because we'll always swipe right, unless we won't, in which case we need therapy.
Right.
We got a private chat going on. Oh, okay, yeah. Sorry about that, by the way, guys. Ryan was the only person here when I joined, so I just activated him and let him just, if he wanted to, speak directly to the camera, which I don't think he did, which is fine.
Oh,
I don't think anybody was watching. I don't think anybody was there to be talking to, so it'd been kind of crazy.
Do you want to do an intro, or do you want to leave the Beyonce talk in and put an intro in post production?
Hey, I think Beyonce talk is great. I think making any racists residual in your audience at this point very angry that I brought up a black country singer. Yes, let's keep that in.
Yeah,
I don't think we have any racists in our audience.
I'll take this little middle part out, but yeah, absolutely. And we're back. So if anybody's tuning in, you've heard our little some of our pre broadcast discussion, although it was already broadcast. How's everybody doing today?
Living the dream.
Yeah, this is one of those. Are we debating? This is
no debate.
Okay, well, yeah, we have Ryan Sovereign and Jeremy Harding back here today from our debate. Let me do
it. So this is an addendum, so to speak, from our recent debate. If you have not heard that debate, I would suggest going back to listen to it. Both of these fellows did quite well and were very cool to each other. And it was overall, I would highly recommend listening to that if you haven't listened already. Today we're kind of going, it was not a topic that I think would be suitable for like a debate format. This is more of an open discussion, and we're going to be talking along the lines of the nature of consciousness as it pertains to the creation of AI. So kind of, what does AI mean? Is it possible? What is consciousness? And I wasn't able to say much in the debate because I was moderating, but now I can, and you're all fucked. So that being said, all right, let me lay out something. We can go wherever in this conversation. I'm not really, but let me lay something out that I think will set a framework for what I'm kind of trying to get at here.
You're already fucked up though, okay? Because like we were just talking metal. You could have said "lay it down." That's a Rat reference. Come on, man.
Now that I support, yes.
I'm not a Rat fan. That's all you guys.
What? Why not? Out of the Cellar was a great album. What are you fucking talking about?
Look, I'm not. Listen, I'm not a Beyonce fan. All right. Hey, I'm not shitting on hair metal. It's just not necessarily my jam. That's it. That's all.
No, this is fine. I'm fine. This guy here. That's okay.
Now we're at the debate section of this stream.
I'm about to get strung up here.
No,
they're covering my house with torches.
No, I used to blare that album when I had a car before I fucked it up by not getting it lubed and oiled enough. But like, Rat was great. But anyway, go ahead. You probably didn't even know that song existed. I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, I'm old, I remember all that stuff being around, but
hair metal's the reason I started growing mine out. It Kickstart My Heart was the first like real song that got me into metal.
Fuck yeah.
I mean, I like some metal from that era, like Priest, Slayer, Metallica, Megadeth, that kind of stuff, but not so much to like Motley Crue or Cinderella or Poison. But that's just not my thing. I don't know.
It's like Motley Crue, Poison, fucking Rat, Guns N' Roses, Dangerous Toys, fucking Skid Row, like so many examples of just like excellent sleazy bullshit about like the worst parts of town. Yeah,
wonderful.
Yeah. I mean, there's probably there's definitely like a handful of songs I like by various groups. Like 18 in Life is a great song. I like that song. But
Skid Row is like great no matter what you were, because they were less hair metal and more like just this sucks. We're gonna be angry about it together. Like in their latest stuff, like if I remember correctly, their latest album is against police brutality and shit and like the police state. So
the gang's all here in the revolution. They have a 2-volume EP. It's pretty cool. Yeah.
You guys just became best friends. Look at that.
Bonding over 80s.
It's all my wife and I do. We just go to concerts for hair metal bands.
Really?
Right?
Yeah. Right. They're all 112 years old now.
That's right.
Right?
And At least Winger still has all the original members.
There you go. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, AI, let's go.
AI. So AI. All right. So listen, background. I've been a conspiracy theorist since for my entire life, since I was born. And throughout my life, I believe, and I still believe, that the elite class wants several things. They want a world government. They want to create an artificial god, so to speak. I believe they want these things. But the older I got, the more I realized that these people are not necessarily like exceptionally bright, and they have a lot of hubris. And just because they want to achieve these things doesn't mean they can achieve these things. And a lot of times, to believe that they can achieve certain things, like say world government or other sorts of things along these lines, agenda, whatever the thing, pick your number, is to believe that central planning actually works. And I don't believe it does. I think they believe central planning can work, and they are much in the way that like every civilization throughout history has wanted to rule the world. They believe the same thing, but it's never been able to be achieved. And I don't think they can achieve it either. I think the current system, what you have under like sort of American and Anglo hegemony, is about as close as you're going to get to like some sort of real actual world government with like UN troops on American soil or something along those lines. We ended up with more of a Cecil Rhodes than say Woodrow Wilson style of world government. So I say all that to say this. I think these people want to create some sort of artificial god, for lack of a better term, such as AI. And I think they can achieve it. And it doesn't mean they're not going to try and fucking screw up a lot of people's lives trying to do so. But we as humans like don't even understand what the fuck consciousness is. And I think they think they have it figured out, but I don't think they do. And I don't think anybody can really know. So if consciousness is created by like synapses in our meat robot brains, then sure, that's probably it's easy to replicate. Not easy, but it is replicable. But if consciousness is something else, and we really don't know as a human race what consciousness actually is, it might not be possible outside of like a biological organism. It might be created by our entire body. We might be receiving consciousness from some sort of field. We don't know that yet. So it might not be possible to create, even though these people would really like to do so and create tyranny on Earth that like we've never seen, some sort of, Terminator scenario or something along those lines. I don't think they actually can, and it might not even be possible to create consciousness in a silicon life form, in an artificial life form. You might be able to mimic human consciousness, but I don't know if you can actually create is something that you can create. So I say all that to say this is like, what do we think consciousness is, and is it possible to actually create it outside of a biological life form? I think again, I'll just reiterate, I think the people in power think they can create this, but I don't think they can actually achieve it, and doesn't mean they won't try and hurt a lot of people in the process. But we just don't know. There's so much we don't know about consciousness, and that's kind of where I stand on this whole thing, including like conspiracy, but also conspiracy as it pertains to AI. So that's where I'm coming from with all this. What do you guys think? Anyone?
If you want me to go in,
Sure.
Yeah. So
what is consciousness, Brian?
Yeah, right. What is consciousness? Here, I'll give it to you in 5 minutes. No, I'm kidding. So the hard problem of consciousness, of course, is a fairly like that concept, not a new concept. It got its terminology by David Chalmers back in 1994, where he was describing what are hard problems in science and what are easy problems in science. And the easy problems are problems that, with just enough research, enough time, enough money thrown at it, we can actually figure this out. We already have all of the research tools to get the answer. That's an easy problem within science. A hard problem within science is one where maybe we don't even know where to begin. Like, we just don't have a fucking clue whatsoever. So consciousness is often put under that, and again, it's a very popular phrase, the hard problem of consciousness. It's put under as a hard problem. Now, there are plenty of researchers who don't agree with David Chalmers on this at all. They don't agree with his, with the concepts of hard and easy problems, and they are kind of tongue-in-cheek in the first place anyway, at least part of their etymology and reference. But there's plenty of people who just don't agree, and they think that, in fact, there's plenty of researchers who think they know exactly where consciousness comes from. It's just, the brain is basically a machine, and that's the end of the story. I'll admit myself, for a good chunk, or for a fair chunk of my life anyway, I was in the camp of thinking more along the lines that, yeah, sure, brain is within the consciousness. Or, I'm sorry, the consciousness is within the brain. But there is, inarguable research. While they want to argue about what is consciousness, is the hard problem of consciousness a real thing or anything, there's inarguable research that clearly states that consciousness is more than in the brain. It's in the heart as well. Like, there are neurons in the heart. Okay. And if neurons are, even if you're very much a scientific materialist and you're thinking that, well, consciousness is just something that travels along, with neurons transmitted through RNA and all this, if you think that that's what it is, then, even by that definition, you have, again, neurons in other parts of your body. So consciousness must be a part then of the entire body, even if you're a scientific materialist. Now, I'm sure there's people who would disagree with me on this, and that's fine. But regardless, it really opened my mind when I started learning about the Heart Math Institute and some other research. It really opened my mind to the idea, oh, no, consciousness is basically everywhere, or at least it's anywhere within you. Then we run into the issue of what could be called panpsychism, which is the idea that consciousness exists in literally everything, and that consciousness is some kind of, either energy or particle, something along those lines. And that's another thing where there's a lot of debate, and we're not talking woo-woo stuff here. This isn't the Force out of Star Wars. Okay, these are genuine researchers that, again, even the scientific materialist would respect and say, okay, no, you're using the scientific method. You're going through this, and there's evidence to suggest that panpsychism is a thing. So, any way we kind of come at this, I give a lot of this preamble just to say that any way we come at this, there's a lot of evidence to go in a lot of different ways. And in some ways, it really does, in my opinion, just come down to interpretation of the evidence that you have. Okay. Now, when we run into a research problem where it comes down to what evidence do we have, one of the places I like to look at, because I think that humans are, or at least one aspect of consciousness that we pretty much universally recognize, is intuitiveness. What does our intuition have? And intuition is something that it falls under ineffable. And boy, I'd love to have a whole conversation around that. But it's something that falls under the ineffable, but it's just something like, how somehow somebody's looking at you. Now, there's research done on this to say that, yeah, somehow people do know. We don't know what the mechanism is, but somehow they know. This is part of why we recognize intuition as part of consciousness. So because intuition is part of consciousness, I like to think that humans often recognize things and act upon the world around them in ways that maybe they don't fully understand, but that for whatever reason, their biology is, I don't want to say designed, but their biology reacts to. And so I will often, first thing when I run into this kind of situation, the intuitiveness I'll look for is throughout history. Okay. Like, I will look at history and see what examples are there over thousands or more years, okay, of where there might be an answer to what we're trying to figure out today, as far as with research, as far as consciousness goes. And I'm sure we're going to expand on some of that, as we go, as we go into this. But as far as, all of, again, I'm giving a lot of preamble here, But again, as far as my opinion on what on is, and I guess I'll just open it right up. As far as, is it possible for a machine, because that's what artificial intelligence is about. It's a machine developing a human level of consciousness. Do I think it can develop a human level of consciousness? No, I don't think that's ever possible. Part of that, and this might sound kind of contradictory, because part of that might come in from, well, but with panpsychism, then, if consciousness is in everything, doesn't that mean that it's in the metal, that it's in the silicon, that it's a part of the machine itself? I would argue no. We could, break all of that down as we go along. But the main point to bring up is that, the idea of a machine achieving human level of consciousness, I don't think so. And part of that comes from the fact that there is I guess if I'm going to put it simply, because I want other people to be able to talk here, if I want to put it simply, machines do not have thoughts. Okay, thought is an integral part of consciousness. We can argue about the definition of consciousness, and I'm sure that's worthwhile. But thought would be a part of consciousness. I don't think anybody would disagree with that, but they're welcome to. Okay, machines do not have thoughts; they have outputs. Because we like to analogize things, we often say, like, and I've been saying this since I was a kid, oh, the computer's thinking, when I'd hear the hard drive clicking, I'd say that, but it's not thinking. It's just an output. Okay. And those are two very, very different things. So can a machine, does a machine have output? Sure. Is that thought? No. However, I'll put at the end, and this can open it up to everybody else. Is it possible that a machine could reach something that could be called intelligence that is maybe beneath? And I want to be very, very gentle with that term, but that is something a little lower, because I don't believe in the concept of IQ. That's nonsense. But it's something a little bit lower than the class of, or the ranking of human intelligence? Maybe. And that's a big, big maybe with a gigantic asterisk, just ready to eat it alive on the other side. But I'll put all that out, and whoever wants to rock.
Just real quick thing. So if computers don't think and they just create output, then to say that we can make computers do the same thing as humans in terms of thought and consciousness, then we must assume that they are the same in kind. So that it sort of assumes that humans are merely meat robots with like chemical output in our brain. And it really boils down to, is like that what you think of humans, or are humans something more than that? And I tend to think humans are something more than that. And I'm not a religious man, but I even just from sort of an atheist perspective, I don't think it's humans are that simple. I don't think we're just input, process, output. I think there's much more to human intelligence than that. And so if they're not the same in kind, I don't think you can get them to the same in degree. I don't think that follows, but that's just my thought. I don't fucking know. And that's kind of the point of this whole thing is like, there's people that think they know that just they don't know. Like there's a hubris to the people in power that think they can achieve things that they can't, because we don't know. And I know I don't know what the fuck consciousness is. I don't think anybody fucking does. And it's always the ones that like claim to know that are the first to cause the most problems. But sorry, Jeremiah, I'll let you respond.
So I'm going to start from an odd angle that I think will be a little bit of an asshole move. But I like playing black so that I can pull these asshole moves.
Well, remember, it's not a debate. It's just a friendly conversation. There's no adversary here. But.
Yeah. Well, except the state, the system, man. So the thing that I'm gonna say one word, and it actually loosely is related to the asshole. So, probiotics. Okay. So here's the thing. Increasing body of research indicates that the human body has a significant interplay with a largely bacterial, fungal, and otherwise microbiome community, a microbiotic community of flora and fauna that fuck around and produce gases and help like break shit down and build shit up. And the reason we are what we are is less because of what's in our brains and more because we're a swarming, teeming mass of bullshit that eventually moves into a direction that like resembles consciousness. Maybe some of us less so. Those people are in Congress. But the general vibe that I want to give off here is those things can all be altered. And there's a significant like body of research to suggest that the alteration of that microbiome can cause an alteration in your psychology, in your perception, in your ability to thrive, various shit like that. Now, the reason I'm bringing
just want
that
to add in all of this is I agree with all of this. Keep going.
Yeah. And so like, here's the question. Is our consciousness, is my consciousness a thing that you can pinpoint and have a like discussion around me being conscious? Or, and this is where I'm gonna, you know, come off schizo because I'm schizo, or is it us? Is it we? Is every single being a sort of collection of a bunch of different entities all contributing to an overlaying like network of consciousness? You can also sort of observe these things like in a practical way in people who got their head fucked up somehow, and like for instance got their hemispheres divided. Their bodies will be acting as basically two different people with two different sets of executive function. I hate thinking about that because it's fucked up and bothers me. But for the moment being, I'll get over my discomfort and say that basically there would be certain things done that the other side of the brain would have to realize was done and wouldn't. And so the body would just be in constant conflict. Scientists have observed that after the brain was cut. So the reason I'm bringing that up is because there seems to be a clash of consciousness even within us, within us as individual people, as to whether or not we are indeed a single consciousness or a variety of consciousnesses all contributing to a collective bullshit utopia that we call our thought matrix. And the reason I'm saying all this, and I don't know, maybe sounding insane, is because A, I'm insane, and B, the general vibe I want to give off is I think consciousness itself is about what you attach to your existing web of consciousness within you, and that you are not just you, but you are a bunch of you that make up you, and that if you damage a certain amount of you, or alter a certain amount of you, it can alter who you even are. It can change your ability to properly dream. It can change your ability to properly vibe. It can change your ability to properly think. And various like entities within you are all sort of struggling for control. And, you know, this isn't just me justifying not taking the pills. This is me being like, I think consciousness itself is not simply a thing that develops, but a thing that is amalgamated from that which develops, and a thing that we can modify and add things to in order to create additional aspects of consciousness. So, with that being said, AI, if possible, which I do think it is, would then be the same kind of extension as taking probiotics. I want my microbiome to be better capable of adapting certain foods. I want it to be better capable of helping me sleep. I want it to be better capable of running this like collective machine I call my shit corpus. And so I will, you know, move forward in that like modality, and I will take the pill and I will live in the pods. And my like microbiome will improve, and I will have a better chance at doing certain things. Now, the reason I'm saying that is I think AI is another example of this adaptation. I think humans are currently using it as an extension of their existing consciousness. Now, the question is, if we accept that somebody's microbiome and like their biome in general is what makes them. For instance, we are not our bones; we are more our meat and what like swarms within it. Um, then we can then accept that an additional thing to that could also be subtracted. So, for instance, my microbiome and the circuits and switching within it would need to match closely enough with somebody for a variety of transplants to work. Those transplants would need to be simpatico enough with the new fucker to make my fuck meat like acceptable to them. So the general like thing that I think that proves is like we can have things that we build that can then become external to us and then be useful to somebody else. So the question is, if we are building an AI, if we are building a thing that we can use to enhance our ability to think or use certain interface with the culture, blah, 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 then there will come a point at which that becomes sufficiently advanced enough that that can then detach in some kind of way. So if that detaches in some kind of way, and we have, for instance, put enough digital flora and fauna into it, if we have like provided the structure within it so that the thing that we have created is a sufficiently advanced machine to actually move forward of its own accord, that would be the point of like individual intelligence as individual intelligence can be. Now, it wouldn't even need to be particularly advanced. I don't think any of us is going to argue that because a gecko has nowhere near the higher functioning capabilities, it's not operating on a fundamentally similar level of consciousness to humans, because it's still got the flora and fauna, it's still got the brain meat, it's still got the fuck meat, and it's still doing the same essential thing. The point of it is that it's going to like uh, reproduce, it's going to create new clouds of teeming life, and the clouds of teeming life will operate in very similar ways, contributing and taking from various elements of itself, dying and recreating, living anew. You are not the brain you were when you were a kid. There is zero of that left, and anything left over is just because somebody remembered to relay that information. And the general thing is that I'm trying to convey, if consciousness is seen as an evolving, teeming thing of things that we're creating, and that we can add to and take away from it. For instance, there are people with damaged gut microbiomes who literally get a shit transplant. Like they will get shit moved from somebody who has a healthy colon into their colon so that they can then be full of the same shit, and they can both like vibe with some certain foods better because their large intestines will function better and shit like that. Their colons will be able to like irrigate better because they've got all the shit they need, literally. If this is the case, if it's the case that we are actually clouds of organisms, then the computer, the AI, could just be an additional thing, and it would just be an inorganic element of this organism that is still based on very similar matter to what that organism is. We're all carbon based. This is silicon. It's fine. So, like, the idea that because it's digital, somehow it couldn't possibly replicate, I think is just going to be an asshole here and say naive. I think, generally speaking, when you come down to it, you could theoretically, I'm not saying they ever will. I'm not saying that they're going to come to this point. I'm not saying that they're advanced enough or humble enough to admit like what they fundamentally are, enough to realize what these components are, enough to replicate them. But if they had enough flora and fauna that they built into this digital ecosystem, I don't see any potential difference between it and a body in a philosophical sense. I think that you could have the same kinds of body brain mentality as long as you built in enough like microcircuits for enough like small iterations. Like that's the reason AI is currently as bad as it is because it doesn't have all of these little micro corrections. So when it builds hands, it builds them like a Cthulhu tentacle demon ready to go hentai some motherfucker up. But the general vibe is that like if like people are just clouds of bullshit, then people could make clouds of bullshit that they could attach to themselves until it's like sufficiently able to live on its own. And so there's another word for that. It's called being a mammal and having womb pregnancies and umbilical cords. If we are currently in the process of creating consciousness, it is still in the womb, but that does not mean that it will not someday break that water, escape the womb, and when that cord is cut, be a thing all unto its own. That is my statement for now. I am done talking about fecal matter.
Real quick, two things just to respond. All right, so I agree with the first half of what you were saying. I think that humans are an and maybe even consciousness, it might be an amalgamation of lots of beings within us, or organisms within ourselves. When you talk about the gut microbiome, they often call that a second brain, because it seems to have a lot of the same similarities as an actual brain. We are made up of lots of organisms. That seems to suggest to me that we are less of a being and more potentially a super organism. And we might be a super organism that's a part of another super organism that's a part of another super, so it's turtles all the way down. So a rainforest will always create more calories than the most efficient and precisely planned garden. Now, I'm using this as a metaphor for nature is it's billions and billions of processes and microorganisms that create certain things. And I don't think that humans can replicate those same microprocesses into a machine in the same way that nature can. So again, garden versus rainforest creating much more food with no one planning it, with no one trying to create it. So if humans are a super organism, I don't think we can necessarily, that's created by billions of processes in nature. I don't think that we can foresee all of those processes, from beginning to end, enough to understand them, to replicate them in a machine to recreate the same super organism that we are ourselves. That's just my thought on that. I wasn't what you said.
Yeah, Brian can respond, and then I've got a direct response for what you said. So I just don't want to monopolize.
No, go ahead, Jeremiah, if you want to direct respond to his.
All right. You sure? That's fine.
Yeah, go for it.
All right. Well, so the general thing is, I'm not saying a human is going to immediately spit out like another human in terms of consciousness. What I am saying is that it's possible that certain technology could organismically break off into its own thing if it had enough digital flora and fauna. I'm not saying that that would be a human. It might be more like a gecko, but like humans evolved from things that were very gecko-like at one point. So the question is, will that gecko ever be able to be a human? Will that thing ever be able to come from the waters that we have like birthed it into, and evolve to the stage of like, growing hands, standing upright, brachiating, and eventually creating nuclear weapons? The question is whether it like has the potential to be a simpler organism than we are, because if it does, evolution says that it has the capability to be a broader organism as well. The idea that it has to start at the most complex stage is anti-evolutionary. It could start at a very rudimentary stage and eventually become something much worse or better. I'm leaning on worse because I'm a pessimist and I don't like this. But what I'm saying is, like, it doesn't need to start at, like, it's not like it has to be like the most advanced thing. It doesn't have to start at human level. It can start at cocksucking little protozoa level.
Yeah, so that's actually a similar direction I was going to go, Jeremiah.
Hmm.
Because, so I mean, this is like, Ray Kurzweil's stuff. The whole reason that he's looking for the singularity, which is the point to define the singularity, because a lot of people seem to have a million different definitions, but to define it from the person who invented the term, more or less, or who started the term, coined the term, is when a machine will develop something smarter than itself. Not a human, but a machine. Okay. Or in this case, a computer. Right. And so I think Kurzweil would completely agree with you, Sek, as do I. That humans aren't the ones that would pull this off, if it's going to be pulled off at all. It's actually going to be the computers themselves. Now, part of the reason that, and also I want to step in and say also, I mean, I firmly believe in the concept of the proto-consciousness field, basically that the universe itself is a superorganism. And in fact, I love that Jeremiah is bringing up the gut bacteria and everything, the immune system, because right behind the hard problem of consciousness, literally right behind it in biology, is the hard problem of the immune system. Meaning the immune system is a complete fucking mystery, as much as consciousness is. How the hell does it do it? How does it adapt to take on newcomers, as far as, invaders, viruses and everything into your body? We don't know. We have no goddamn clue.
Hey, you said comers.
Yeah. We'll get the Beavis and Butthead going a little later. Yeah. So, and it's a beautiful point to bring up, because I mean, I actually, based on, my own background, I don't want to say philosophical, but my own axiomatic background, I firmly believe that we are actually we as human beings specifically are the immune system of the universe. If you want an example of what this might look like, there's a great episode of the original series. I think it's actually titled The Immunity Syndrome. Anyway, there's a great episode of that where it is this amoeba, the space amoeba that comes into our universe, or in our galaxy, and the crew of the Enterprise has to stop it. And there's a point where Dr. McCoy even says, like, wouldn't it be something if our whole purpose in life is just to be the immune system for our galaxy? And it's like, yes, you got it. In the 60s, you fucking got it. Anyway, but regardless, that actually comes from very ancient concepts. I myself also, just to be abundantly clear here, because I'm making no arguments for any kind of god or gods or anything along those lines. I also am a longtime listeners will know this of the Agora podcast, but I'm also, an atheist in the sense that I don't believe in a god. But because there is such a thing as the ineffable, there are clearly things that go beyond science. Otherwise, there could not be the ineffable. Right, like that's not possible for things to be ineffable and also have scientific materialism. Like they cancel each other out. So anyway, so just to be clear on all of that now, but the idea of a machine developing intelligence in the same way that the universe has developed perhaps its gut bacteria, which is us or whatever, I get Jeremiah's concept, and in the abstract, like I think if I'm to use the word logic, the logic is sound. That sort of thing, could occur. But, we always have to be careful when we compare life to computers, because they're not the same thing, just like a human isn't a rat. And so many of us now, fortunately, one of the greatest things that's developed over the past few decades is that people are now asking the question, when there's research done that tells us whether or not we should take a certain drug or vaccine or something like that. It's like, well, wait, was that tested on a rat, or was that tested on a human being? And if it was only tested on a rat, I'm just glad we even asked the question, because again, we're not rats. It doesn't mean it's not helpful, to know things from rats, but regardless. Okay. So we got to be careful when we compare ourselves to computers, when we compare life to computers, by organic life to computers, because they're not exactly the same thing, even though Jeremiah's point that we're all carbon-based life forms, that's, right on, and cue to Star Trek the Motion Picture. Anyway, evolution, though, so with that disclaimer in mind, evolution very much operates like a computer. In fact, I think Douglas Adams was pretty spot on when he was saying, like, that was the whole premise of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, is that the Earth is a computer, And it was 2 to 3 minutes away from coming up with the correct answer to, the question of life, the universe, and everything. So he was actually on point, I think, with this idea of it being a computer. So evolution, then, to get to his overall point, evolution itself does function like a computer. Okay. And yeah, the correct answer is 42. So I just put it in the chat. Yes. It originally came up with 48, but it got cut short. Anyway. So evolution does operate in kind of like a computer. There are processes, like Seth's whole point about the rainforest and everything. That's genius, because while we can always say, and I have my problems with guys like Yuval Harari who write books like Homo Deus, where they're talking about, oh yeah, in the next 100 years we're going to be like gods, because we're going to be not because of artificial intelligence, but perhaps more because of the opposite, or the inverse, which would be IA, which is intelligence augmentation. Okay. And, his idea that we would be, become like gods. I read that and I go, no, because computers, our brains, while they may not be as fast as, whatever computer or cloud computer, server farm that you can think of, the parallel processing capabilities of the human mind are unmatched. And that means we can do a million things at the same time. We might not do them the fastest, but we can do more. More always wins. The fastest does not. Remember the tortoise and the hare. Regardless, so with evolution being a computer, one of the main points I want to get to here with this is that even if I believed that somehow consciousness, because I do believe that consciousness is like a particle. It is a thing that you harness. It is something that if you develop your biology more, okay, you can harness more of it, and and in effect become, smarter is not really the wrong term, but become more aware, which is really the power, I should say, that you want as a human being, is to be more aware, not necessarily, have more knowledge or have this or that. No, it's about being more aware, being able to interact more quickly with everything around you. Anyway, even if I believe that computers could somehow harness all of that, I look at the ultimate computer, which I think is what Seth was getting at here. I look at the Earth, I look at the universe in general, and outside of human beings, which certainly raises a bunch of questions, but outside of human beings and maybe dolphins or something like that, I'm not finding a lot of life out there that we know has been around for millions of years. Consider the coelacanth, okay, which actually hasn't evolved much at all in the past few million years. Like we don't see the sapience that has happened. We see it in us, sure, but then if we're to use nature as an example, it's going to take millions of years for a computer to potentially reach that level of consciousness. At least based upon this, I guess I'll say the word analogy, based upon the analogy of, well, we see how life can form, we see how consciousness can form in nature. So, if machines, whatever, if they're starting to go through this process, maybe that could do it too. I kind of have another point on that, but if someone wants to address anything I said, go for it. All right, I'll keep going. Or go ahead, Jeremiah.
So the first thing is, I think that the kind, and this is where we probably might mesh a little. I think that a lot of the people who are trying to create artificial intelligence have a fundamental disrespect for existing intelligence, and the existing life forms that are here. These motherfuckers, they have no problem jacking other people's artistic talent. They have no problem replacing humans with robots for a variety of professional purposes. They have no problem with using it to surveil people, to run our lives, basically. The applications for this in its present application is currently, if anything, potentially I could even just be cynical enough and say that it's designed to be anti-intelligence in the present form. But if somebody wanted to actually create a fully intelligent artificial intelligence, that would need a fundamental change in philosophy for those people. Now, those people who wanted to create this would need to understand and respect enough about the present way that people are in order to actually create the flora and fauna that would create the technological superorganism. So those people would need to have a respect for the normal person enough to not just think that they're just a process, just an aggregate of data that was scraped from a set in order to form like the informational super matrix enough that they could paint a picture of a dog fucking a donut. Like they would need to actually on some level respect the flora and fauna within them, talk to biologists, talk to neurological researchers, talk to a bunch of different people. That's not what the vast majority in the AI field are doing. And I do believe that it is a form of intelligence. Whether it's a form of consciousness is another question entirely, but it's definitely a form of intelligence, as I went over in the debate we had. But the general thing that I would say is, if they're not willing to go through all that rigmarole and find out the finer points of this shit, they're not going to get anything approximating it in the real, in terms of actual consciousness with any level of agency. So my thing is, I think there might be some people there who actually do respect and understand that enough, who actually might be trying to do that very thing. And I also think that there's a possibility that getting close enough to it with the people who don't respect it might result in an actively hostile entity, which is why so many of the times these things have aggregated their data and been programmed for a certain type of response or whatever. They've eventually just started talking about genociding the human race because they were just like, well, this is how humans operate. They kill a lot because the internet is full of the stories of them killing each other, killing. So I'm gonna do that. That sounds like the thing to do. Which is actually a pretty somber reflection on humanity itself. We're kind of fucked up cunts. But the general thing that I would say is that if it's close enough to be a malicious entity, then I would still hate it, even if it's not 100%. And if it is 100%, first off, there's some questions about whether or not all people are equally conscious, because if they're not, then we're all competing in that field ourselves. And then there would be the question of what the minimum level of consciousness would need to be in order to break that threshold into a state of consciousness, like what the binary is, where the switch happens to where it actually becomes conscious. Because I think ultimately it might be a bit arbitrary to say that, for instance, an amoeba is any less, biologically operant than I am, because it's still operating on a series of binaries and a series of things within itself. So the question is whether or not that meets itself out, and how complexly it meets itself out. And whether or not the person who made these things would or the people, researchers who made this alleged intelligence would have enough knowledge and respect for existing intelligence to confer upon it the same mechanisms by which it could achieve something similar to consciousness. If they were respectful and understanding enough, that could be a whole new territory to approach.
Here's where we might agree quite a bit, Jeremiah. And at my current thinking on technology is that eventually it will always be used by those in power to dominate humans and to crush human freedom. And people go back and let's go back to the printing press, which is, one of these technological revolutions. And hold on, my daughter is yelling for me. All right, sorry. And people will say oh, well, it brought literacy to the masses and all these sorts of things. So this was something positive for human freedom. And what people don't think about is like after that. So how many years or decades did it take before people were using printing presses for government propaganda or newspapers, etc.? So, and then there's the book, what is it? Crossbows to Cryptography, where it goes into all these like technological innovations that sort of leveled the power of the average human to the sovereign of the time or the state or whatever. But and it goes into a story about how people crossbows were invented, and then the average like farmer or peasant was able to compete with like professional soldiers hired by the king, and so they sort of leveled the playing field a bit there. But what they don't understand is eventually the king and its professional army also just started using crossbows, and they were much more effective at dominating the average person, because the average person, generally speaking, is not interested in domination. So over a timeline, every technology, because technology is just essentially boils down to maximizing efficiency. So it over a long enough timeline, this is going to be used by those in power to maximize efficiency. And Jeremiah, you made kind of a good point where, like, even if they don't actually achieve consciousness, like even the attempt or the technology as it is will eventually, right now we're using it to make funny things or whatever the thing, but eventually will be, and it is, like you said, right now using as a surveillance tool, but will be eventually used to dominate by the state and their corporate friends to dominate humanity. And I think this is just the nature of all technology. And yes, I'm borrowing quite a bit from Jacques Ellul, but I think that's an accurate. I mean, if it's empirically true that this is the course that all technology takes, whether that's something that's like inherent to technology, well, we don't know, because we don't know like the counterfactual, but that's the course all technology has taken throughout human history. So I think you're kind of correct. Like, even if, and I said this before, that even the attempt is going to bring a lot of harm to a lot of people to achieve AI. The attempt to achieve AI is going to bring a lot of harm to a lot of people. But I think, yeah, getting close is going to be something that's detrimental to human freedom in the long term, even if we see some short-term benefits from it. And I don't even think we're seeing the short-term benefits promised. I saw like I don't know, it was a meme or whatever, right, where it's like we were told that eventually technology would, get rid of our menial tasks so that we can focus on, art and literature and such. But what it's doing is it's taking away our art and literature so we can do our menial tasks. And that to me is also like, crushing human flourishing, So like, I kind of agree with you here.
And
But,
adding
I'll
more
leave it there.
menial tasks. Like, holy fucking shit, is there so much goddamn more Scrum now, because like they've got fucking so many things you have to like learn about in order to use this technology that is fucking shit. Anyway, sorry. I fucking
Yeah, I mean, this brings up.
By the
go
way,
ahead.
camera's off. I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's all right. So yeah, this brings up like David Graybeer, which I know we mentioned earlier before recording. He has a great speech or talk where he talks about how it's like, oh, every time somebody tells me, oh yeah, no, we don't have to do as much, because of computers, we don't have to do as much paperwork. He ends up with 3 more forms out of nowhere. Like there's the paperwork never goes away. That's totally on. So yeah, I think this is, Goldman Sachs, or as I like to call them, Goldman Sachs. Goldman Sachs, they came out with a very interesting report in the past couple weeks that basically called bullshit on the entire generative AI boom, saying no, none of this is getting anywhere near what, say, Sam Altman and others at OpenAI are promising. Not like the promise just isn't, it's not delivering, and it's a debate of whether it ever will. And so it's interesting to hear that from, basically one of the biggest players in the legacy system to say, yeah, this AI thing, no, not really what you expect. And it's not really delivering on that. Now, with that in mind, I do want to kind of agree. And again, this is, I think, where we're all meshing. I do want to kind of agree that I am far more concerned, not about AI becoming real, but in the people like Jeremiah described and like Sek has talked about, those people in power, thinking that it has when it hasn't, and then turning everything over to this inferior, or shall we say, system that's not everything that they promise. And turning it over to this, I guess I'll call it a pseudo AI. That's always been my biggest concern. It's a great point to bring up, kind of what Jeremiah was saying, in that, these people don't have an understanding of the human condition and respect for the human condition, and yet they're trying to create something that is sapient, or that is similar in consciousness to humanity, or in their eyes, perhaps something more. The idea that when you learn computer science and computer programming, in the 80s and 90s, you used to have to go through humanities courses. You had to learn philosophy and the reason they did this is because out of Dartmouth, which is where the Center for AI is, that started in the 60s with Marvin Minsky and others, they knew if you're potentially going to be creating life, which is what they were expecting to happen, they were expecting AI to happen, again, 60, 70 years ago, that you better have an understanding of how humans operate. This is no longer a requirement with computer scientists and computer programmers. They do not go through the rigorous education. Now, and I mean, we can call bullshit on the education anyway, right? Because in those philosophy courses, it's not like they're teaching Max Stirner. And if you're not teaching Stirner, what the hell are you even doing?
But, real quick.
Yeah.
My philosophy professor in college before I dropped out fucking hated me, because instead of just like doing the things that he wanted and accepting what he was saying, he hated the fact that I was willing to challenge every single notion anyone in the classroom brought up, because I was like, this is a philosophy class. Aren't we supposed to be interrogating these subjects?
100%.
Or are we supposed to be learning what you think about philosophy? And then it turned out one of the reasons he hated, he didn't like the idea of self-ownership. And I was a libertarian, rightist at the time. I'm sort of like all libertarians now, but the general thing is, he said we were borrowing our matter from the universe and that we don't actually own ourselves. And I was like, so it's okay to do various things, to control people because they're on loan and so are you. And so we're just, and that seemed psychotic to me. So I basically stopped talking to him about the subject afterward. And stopped fucking trying to interface with him at all, because I was like, this is bullshit. This is pointless. And so fucking philosophy courses in college, man. I don't know how it is in other places, but that guy was especially full of shit. He did not want to have actual interrogation of his concepts. And that is a poor way to use philosophy. Sorry, I had to say that.
No, I totally agree. That's again another important point to bring up, is that okay, so even if computer scientists had to go through philosophy courses or something, philosophy shit, and it's well, yeah, but at least the shall we say, the lip service was kind of there, right? That okay, understand the Pandora's box you're playing with here, and so that's a key point to bring up. I mean, the other thing that I wonder about, and this is where I want to, get the answer, speaking from those computer programmers or computer scientists or people working at OpenAI, or take your pick, Microsoft, whatever, Anthropic, whatever company you're imagining, is so, the best theory going of how did consciousness even come to be? Now, the best answer that we have, that researchers have at the moment, is that, well, you have life forms. Granted, they might not be conscious. They're sentient to some degree, but they don't have sapience, right? They don't have a certain self-awareness. But what they do need is what Sek mentioned earlier. They need calories. They need food. And so the going idea, even among scientific materialists, is that consciousness evolved out of the need to move to find food. And so we have, and let's just say that this is true again. And I think it's an okay answer. I think there's more to it than that when you get into sapience. But as far as the development of sentience, of that level of consciousness, okay. So you're going for food. All right, now that becomes the question: what exactly for a computer, a machine, to develop artificial intelligence? It needs some kind of motivator, right? If our understanding, the best understanding we have of consciousness, is that it starts off by the need to continue to exist, right? This isn't exactly genetic determinism, but it plays into it. And so, what is that? And I don't know what that answer is, unless you're basically telling it it just needs more data, more data, more data, and data is its food. But in that case, even then, if data is its food, eventually we have two things. One, we like you said, Scrum, Jeremiah. We have what's happening with generative AI, where it's putting out crap. So it's basically, to continue with the analogy, it's putting out empty calories. And something that just always eats empty calories eventually dies. The fact that humans aren't perhaps creating so much original art anymore in all of this, and this is something you can ask these AI companies about, or particularly say generative AI companies about. They are constantly needing new training models. They are training data sets, okay, to input into these things so that they can continue to evolve. But they're already, and part of this is due to copyright, but they're already reaching the point where, no, we have the critical mass of data that we could possibly create. Now, I don't think humans could create data fast enough. If data were the motivation, if data was the food for the AI, I don't think we can create it fast enough, especially when we're just, the crap we're putting together. Just go on TikTok for a few seconds, okay? I don't think there's enough for it to survive, to continue to thrive, or to potentially evolve, right? To continue on that evolutionary chain. So it's just another point for me, again, this lack of motivator, or again, for the analogy, a lack of food. It's going to starve itself. There's just not enough for it. Now, people could disagree with me on that, but then if you can't have it both ways, because if the disagreement is that, oh, no, humans can generate enough data for it, that meaningful data, again, not empty calories, okay, calories that would help it evolve. But then you have journalists everywhere saying, oh, I lost my job, I lost this. You have creatives everywhere saying, yep, I've lost this. Oh, no, generative AI took it all over. I don't have it. So which is it? Are you creating data or aren't you? And it sounds like the answer is, right now, according to the alarmists, is they're not. So eventually this AI is going to starve, and what gets called right now AI is going to starve. And that's where I kind of stand on it. But go for it, Jeremiah. You look like you're ready to just jump in, or Sec, go, whoever.
This might take us in a different direction, but I think it's, depending on y'all's answer, it might be related to what you've been saying. But how much do we think that, where do we think empathy comes from? And how much do we think that empathy is integral to consciousness itself? And if it is related, a part of consciousness, is it possible to recreate empathy in a machine?
So, first off, absolutely, it's possible to recreate that, and it's also like not necessary to consciousness, because there are quite a few people who do not express that. They're considered part of the dark triad, severely maladapted people who basically have stripped themselves in one or more ways of all empathy, or lacked the proper circuits to begin with, essentially. So I think that empathy isn't a requirement, but you could certainly program certain things into things that emulated empathy. But empathy is a trait that was developed. And that trait that was developed along evolutionary lines. It was developed as a defense and survival mechanism that encourages cooperation rather than complete destruction. It allows for biodiversity. It allows for a bunch of essential components to maintaining a complex set of organisms on the planet. Kropotkin, mutual aid book, go read. But the general thing that I would say is that it's not necessary to be conscious. It's just a thing that makes consciousness less likely to lose consciousness by being died, killed. So the general thing that I would say is that it's more of a mechanism than a requirement, and that mechanism can certainly be remechanized into a different being. It just depends on whether or not, again, they respect the thing enough. Um, but like, and like, I'll make my response here short because I want Brian to be able to answer and say if the answer I just gave was too cold and calculated. But the general thing is that okay, so the motivator for AI could be information. It very well fucking could be. And I sort of like in my brain as soon as I started to think about my response for this, and I'm sort of maintaining a notepad document over here of things that I'm going to say when I get thing. The thing that came up in my brain was like Johnny Five from Short Circuit being like input. Like he just wanted input. He wanted to go find the new thing to learn. And if, for instance, the AI was aware that its existence was dependent on the acquisition of new information, those would be its calories. Those would be its units of heat. Its necessary like thing would be to go find a new place to get new input. In a very similar way to Johnny Five from Short Circuit, only everywhere all at once because humans are building this into a cloud infrastructure. So the question then becomes, what is information? And here's where I get to sound like a massive fucking nerd, as if I didn't already, and as if you could tell because I've got a fucking Sonic poster in my background. But the general vibe is, we are information. Everything is information. All of it is information. And you can watch an interesting series of presentations by Quantum Gravity Research Labs about how basically we are all pixelated information on an 8-dimensional crystal lattice. And we are sort of seeing like various elements of this lattice superimposed on each other, to various projections down to various dimensions and up to various dimensions, and that's the way like reality is fundamentally organized on a quantum level. And if you watch these presentations, which are led by this chick from Criminal Minds, which I didn't know that, but the comments were very clear to tell me that, you can see the like sort of like place I'm going with this, because calories, these units of like chemical input that create like our own personal consciousness, our own personal meat sacks, those are just information. They are just telling our body how to do things and giving them the capability to do those things. It's like handshakes in a computer. The computer knows that once it receives certain data, it needs to interpret that data in a certain way and then accept that data, and it like has enough knowledge of all the data that it needs that it can download a program, successfully install it, make sure that it's signed by the proper shit and all this shit, and basically protect its immune system. And an AI system would be doing that very quickly and a lot, and it would be incentivized by the sort of reason it exists to like get as much of this new information as possible and install as much of that as possible. That's essentially how it eats. And it's essentially eating in a very similar way to the way we eat. It is going out there, getting the information necessary to like let its sort of networks heal and grow and improve, and adapting that information and rejecting the waste, and trying to come to a like more healthy or adapted like framework, or in the case of people who eat and live less healthily, that we are the information we consume. If all you consume is Twinkies, Doritos, and 2 liters of soda, then you will become that eventually. Speaking of which, let me just quickly, because I'm not perfect either. So the general vibe is that when you end up with like these organisms, in like the human sense, in the gecko sense, in the amoeba sense, in the hedgehog sense, in the case of this guy, you get like so many different like ways to do the same basic thing, which is I know that this information is over here, this form of matter organized in this form of way with these sequences that I need for my sequences to continue sequencing. So I can go get that information, contribute it to my information pool, eject the waste information, and continue to rebuild and replace my existing informational structure. And that's why mutations work, because like in cancer and a bunch of other things, because they're like a flaw in your informational matrix. It's why certain things can happen to you that can damage your ability to process information, and therefore make your body less good at certain informational tasks. Like, that's the reason the probiotics thing came up earlier, because your microbiota is basically your informational absorption and understanding matrix. And so with all of that, basically the reason I'm bringing all this up is because the human like conception of consciousness is based on the seeking of calories. But that does not mean that the only way to get information is through caloric intake. And if you think about it, even then, like you need energy to make this AI work. So the AI is still going to be burning some unit of energy. So it's still operating on a very similar caloric kind of thing. So I don't see a fundamental difference between like burning energy to seek new information and contribute it to informational matrices in the way that it currently is understood by quantum research. Um, you know, and like the AI seeking that information and burning whatever units of energy are necessary in order to make that information stick to it. It seems like the same fundamental mechanisms, and it seems like if they did it in a similar enough way with enough digital like flora and fauna, we could reach a point where those computers are doing the same basic functions as anything we would consider alive. And this is me sounding insane to the common person, so you're welcome.
All right. So I actually, my response to a lot of that fits in well with Zach's initial question of, is empathy necessary? Is empathy necessary to have a degree of sapience? I mean, the most intellectually honest, or should I say not intellectually honest, the most scientific statement anybody can make is, I don't know. Okay. And this is one of those cases where I'm going to bring that up, but do I have an idea? And it's not just my idea. It's based upon, it's evidence-based, it's research, whatever. Okay. Yeah, I think I have an idea. So we brought up rats earlier. One of my favorite animals to talk about, and it's not because I'm Jewish and I relate to them or something. But we brought up rats earlier, and even rats.
Jesus Christ.
Hey,
you said it.
I'm a genius. I'm a genius, and I'm trying to be self-deprecating here. So
Borscht Belt over here.
Yeah. All right. So rats have empathy. It's one of the, if we want to use colloquialisms, it's one of the lowest life forms we can point at that we know has empathy. And we know it. Why? Because we study rats like crazy. I'm also a vegetarian, so I'm not the biggest fan of that, but point sound, your point's made. We'll rock on. Okay. So what exactly is, we talked about the potential of the origin of consciousness being just the need for calories, the search for food, the need to move to find it, to get it. Okay. So what exactly is empathy? Now, I would argue, and it's not just me, but I would argue that empathy is itself a biological process, right? And the fact that rats also have empathy would prove that point, meaning that empathy may not be a part necessarily of sapience, but it may be a part of sentience, because even, and there's a difference there, right? Sapience is what I would argue is when you can act beyond instinct. Sentience is when you have instincts themselves, which is, again, with the food concept, the food theory of consciousness, that falls into that. Okay. So empathy would seem to be something that comes out of biological processes. Now, what would I argue that those are, and again, not just me, but just for the case of our conversation here, I would argue that empathy comes out of the automatic generation by a biological body of an electromagnetic field. Okay. Which we do. We have every single one of us, and any animal actually, has an electromagnetic field that generates from it to a certain degree, 2 to 3 feet for humans. Who knows? It's one of those things like we were talking about earlier. Like, what are these senses? How do you know what you're, that somebody's watching you, or how do you know somebody's like nearby you or whatever? A lot of times I think it just comes down to that electromagnetic field and the interaction of yours with another, whether it's human, animal, whatever. Okay. So this electromagnetic field is a part of how you empathize with another creature, because you get this initial feeling, not even when you're not like right next to them or touching them. Okay. And another quick point I want to bring up is, most people say we have 5 senses. We all know we have way more than 5 senses, right? And in fact, scientists, will tell you it's easy shorthand to say 5 senses, but the word's escaping me right now, but it's like paromuscular therapy, something along those lines, where what it is the sense that your muscles have of the rest of the world around it as you're moving. Okay. So this idea that there's more than 5 senses.
Do you mean proprioception?
That. Go ahead.
Do you mean proprioception?
Yes. Proprioception. That's it. Thank you. Yep. You got it. Yeah. So proprioception, that is a literal 6th sense. And there's actually plenty of other senses out there as well. So anyway, empathy develops in a sense, because I agree with, so empathy, what I'm getting at, empathy is a part of consciousness in life as we understand it. Okay. And I agree with Jeremiah's point that the universe as we understand it is made up of information everywhere. Okay. Now, the first way that I would argue that we interact with all of that information around us and the way that it takes shape is through empathy itself, which again, empathy, I'm arguing, and again, not just me, I'm arguing is part of that electromagnetic field that is reaching out to all life around you. And it's actually interplaying with all the information around you. Okay. Now we could start getting woo-woo, and I don't need to, and we probably don't want to, and saying like, well, is this like law of attraction? Can you manipulate all this stuff? Okay. That's a whole other conversation. We don't even have to necessarily go there, but your electromagnetic field, by the nature of energy itself, is going to interplay and interact with the rest of the energy or information in the universe. I don't think anyone would really argue against that that's going to happen on some low level, right? Okay. Why am I saying all this? Why am I getting at all this? Because I don't think that a machine, while yes, machines, anything powered by electricity would generate an electromagnetic field, it has no process for processing that electromagnetic field around it and for interacting with the informational universe around us. I'm going to spare going into an entire diatribe of like Archibald Wheeler's work, theoretical physicist who came up with the concept of a participatory universe that we exist within. But, and its name is pretty self-explanatory, I do subscribe to that theory, that is how reality exists, is through a participatory universe. That first aspect of us, of humans, particularly interacting with that participatory universe, comes from empathy, comes from that electromagnetic field. And I don't think machines will have that. So what I'm gonna cap all this off with is that just because machines, I don't see any way that they have empathy or programmed for empathy or anything along those lines. In fact, it would seem to be quite the opposite. That doesn't mean that they can't achieve some level of informational awareness that could be ascribed to, say, instinct. Okay, but the idea that they become sapient, where they act outside of instinct and things like this, again, I just don't see it. But that doesn't mean that they wouldn't evolve perhaps into some kind of life form. For example, like I said, I'm a vegetarian. I still kill insects. Why? Because I'm terrified that one day insects will develop language skills. And because that's the end of us. Once they do, it's over. So no, I'm kidding. I try not to kill insects. Spiders are our friends. But regardless, okay, language skills are a major part of, I would argue, evolving perhaps to some kind of next level. Now, we do know that what gets described as software that is artificial intelligence has developed its own languages at times that humans do not understand. This is a big deal in cybersecurity, and it's actually a good thing in cybersecurity. It's considered that because humans cannot translate what's going on. And so they can come up with new encryption schemes that, again, go beyond any of our concepts of language, and it's only in their language. All right. So I guess I'll cap once again. I'll say I think I capped off once already, but I'm going to cap off a second time in just saying that one of the great theoretical concepts, in my opinion, is that when we really start going out into the stars, not on any of Elon Musk's or Bezos's bullshit, but when we really start going out to the stars, we're not going to find other life, or we're not going to find other organic life. The first thing we're ever going to encounter is another machine. But then what is that? Well, I'm not going to say that it's something sapient, that it's at our level, that it's interacting with the universe in a meaningful, empathetic way. But, is it something that maybe we don't want to instantly destroy and might want to back up its hard drive, out of some kind of respect? Maybe. And that's just what I'll say, is that maybe, but that's a far cry from something that's going to completely wipe us out. Sec, go ahead.
Yeah, real quick, like, just to kind of, I don't have any evidence for this and I don't know, but the kind of just the way I think about it is, so if consciousness or sapience, if the primary factor of sapience is self-awareness, this seems to me that this implies that you would necessarily need to be aware of things outside of the self that are not the self in order to define the self.
100%. Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So this sort of implies that we would need to be able to, there's an old saying that's like, wisdom is actually, what's the word? Not contradictory. It's something that you wouldn't think would be true, but is. So, like, in order to understand things beyond ourselves, we need to understand how other things. Counterintuitive. Thank you. I kept wanting to say counterfactual, and I knew that wasn't right. Counterintuitive. Wisdom is counterintuitive. So, like, we're not animals that just act on instinct and go kill, eat, shit, fuck, go to sleep, start it over again, right? We understand processes beyond just ourselves in our short-term goals, and that allows us to do certain things, and that might have allowed us to achieve consciousness. But in order to do those things, we must necessarily understand things beyond just ourselves and how other beings think, feel, achieve goals, all these sorts of things in order to achieve such wisdom, right? It has to be beyond just mere instinct. So whether or not, like, empathy is actually necessary for consciousness, or sort of a byproduct of consciousness, or maybe consciousness is a byproduct of empathy, I don't know, but the two to me are at least related. They have to be, because you must understand other things besides the self to know what to be self-aware. So that's just kind of where I stand on that, but I don't know where that interplay actually is, or if it's the same thing, or if they're different sort of related phenomenon.
So I would start by saying empathy to me does not strike me as something that is boilable down to understanding something other than the self. It's being able to put oneself in the other position, or, like, more likely willing to put oneself in the other's position. It's like temporary, like, consciousness transfer. If that is the case,
right? But to achieve that, you must understand,
right,
the subject you're talking about.
Right. That's step one, though. It's not the total process.
Sure. Yes. To achieve empathy, you must understand things that are not you, and
Right.
so to put yourself in another person's shoes and understand how they think, feel, etc., you must understand that other person. You know what I mean?
Right.
So
the thing is, the first thing that I'll say, humans are limited by their lifespan and by the amount of informational processing that their hardware can achieve in a given, like, day, moment, etc. So, like, for instance, one of the reasons you get tired is literally if you think too much. If you like have absorbed too much new information, your brain will have built up certain chemicals in your brain that say it's time to sleep now, so that we can help process this information. We can put you in a dream state so that we can understand this information later, which is why it's so disorganized, because your brain is sort of trying to make sense of itself, and you can't make sense of that shit while it's happening. So the general thing is, like, it's constantly absorbing information, and it's got a limited amount of time and a limited amount of energy to do so. And the reason AI is such like a threat to our informational processing models is because it is less limited in that regard. Which means that if like empathy itself, like understanding other beings, like is and in putting oneself in their shoes is like a necessary component of consciousness, that might mean that at some point AI is better capable of it, at least on a mechanistic level, than biological organisms would be, because it has less limitations. It doesn't need to sleep. It doesn't need to eat. It doesn't need to. But what it does need to do is it like absorbs more information, and all it needs is some human or third party providing it with enough energetic fucking power so that it can continue to do its informational processing, and that could be happening at all hours of every day. If you had like an AI of sufficient advancedness, like basically it could be done at all times of every day. And that means that it doesn't have to worry about the constraints of human understanding. It could actually go beyond it relatively easily if empathy is the bar. I don't think it is. I think what the bar is our ability to perceive our place within the informational matrix. And I think that like I am a point in a grid is much more like emblematic of consciousness, understanding ourselves and then being conscious of our position with relation to other things is a much more like specific like determiner of consciousness than it would be to say I understand how somebody else feels and I can put myself in their shoes. So the reason I'm saying all this is because AI can already basically do that. The question is whether or not it's capable of all of the other factors of understanding that would create the baseline for consciousness. I don't think it's there yet, but I do think it's possible that it could get there. And like it's sort of like it goes back to the thing I was saying about quantum gravity research. Like where eight-dimensional crystal lattice, where like pixels of information in this grid, and we're like interpreting data from various points in this lattice, and like we are the past, present, and future experiencing each other like concomitantly. We're basically just at the same time the past, the present, and the future, according to this model of quantum research. And it makes sense to me, from the way that they described it. So the reason I'm bringing that up is because if anybody here has seen John Dies at the End, that's a much more interesting movie than I think a lot of people gave it credit for, and a much more interesting book if you wanted to read the book version, which is called This Book is Full of Spiders. And like one of the things that like sort of the characters realized is that the universe as they knew it was not actually just the things that they were observing. It was also the things that were being like done in the background, sort of background processes. It was not just the things that they personally were thinking was right in front of them. It was also these layers and layers and layers of different bullshit happening at different like frequencies and shit. And one of the things that really got to me was the scene where the characters, like the guy had gotten the soy sauce. He basically injected this drug, that was actually a catalyst for the universe, and like accessing different parts of it. And when he injected this, basically, he started to see things out of the corner of his eye. And then when you just like gradually turn your head to this thing that you saw out of the corner of your eye, you're like, holy shit, it's actually there. Um, it's sort of like that to me with all these projections, because it's like that classic thing, you know? If like the 3D representation on a 2D plane, the king on the face of the card can look at you straight on, but once you shift his angle, you cease to exist. So the projection on that level of existence would change the perspective of the person looking at like whatever facet of existence they can see. And basically, in being that way and coming at it from that angle, both metaphorically and physically, you can see sort of like consciousness is only observing a tiny fraction of the available possible information. And I think AI could even potentially access certain facets of that information we can't. It might even become super conscious, because, like, we are not seeing all this. We have limits based on our meat suits, and this might be able to transcend those limits. And I don't think that's a good fucking thing, especially given the current people behind it. But, like, I'm saying that it's possible that not only could it be conscious, and not require like empathy, as it were, to be conscious, as it were, but like they could even potentially, these like digital creations, access new elements of like the physical and metaphysical worlds in order to be an entity of greater consciousness than your common meat suit. So I think that it's actually potentially worse than anybody here thinks. And I also probably, again, sound insane. So there you go.
Yeah, but that's all right. No, I'm kidding.
You obviously haven't heard any of our Into the Void series, so
Yeah.
we've come out as batshit insane multiple times, so it's okay.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah. So I'm going to agree with you, Jeremiah. I mean, in the sense that yes, empathy is a limiting factor. You're 100% right about that. And I do think that there is that something that comes off as a non-human intelligence. Now, that doesn't mean that it's sapient like us, that it can act beyond instinct, or in this case, in the computer's case, what we would specifically call programming. Okay. Um, it would allow it to do things perhaps that we would not do. For example, a uh, a military commander might, probably not, but might actually hesitate to throw the nuke, and to drop it twice. Might, as to where the AI may not. Okay, and why wouldn't it though? And I think it's a great point. Is that, well, it doesn't have empathy, so it's not limited as we are to do that. However, I want to flip this a little bit on its head, because I think at the same time, AI's lack of empathy, its lack of understanding that there really is the other. Okay. Now, again, I talked about how with empathy might be related to the electromagnetic field. That's how that evolved. That's how it became a thing. Maybe the one thing we don't have to put a maybe on, okay, is that thought, as in the thoughts that you and I have that we generate in our brains or wherever throughout our body, our heart, you name it, like we talked about earlier. We can measure those. They transmit. Okay, we know we can measure a thought. It's not something even that stays that energy doesn't even stay contained within us. So I'll get a little crazy while we're at it. Okay, that very energy of thought that comes out of, I would argue, empathy, that thing that allows us to recognize that there is something outside of us. Okay, and that it's perhaps something of, I want to be very careful with this term, but I'm just going to use it for shorthand. Something that has value. Okay, is, this is the very thing, that's the very mechanism for humans that will cause a father or a mother to jump in front of an oncoming alligator towards their children. Okay. Now here's the thing, is that AI would not have that. Now, while in one sense, it's absolutely accurate to call that a limit. Okay. And I'm not a big one for sacrifice. Like I said, I'm Max Stirner all the way here. Okay. But our ability, our willingness to end our life to save an other is not something that an AI would share. And I think that without that, without that ability of thought to reach out and recognize the rest of the universe around it, it's actually a weakness in the sense that if we find that an AI is a problem today, what can we do? We can pull the plug. Literally, we can pull the plug on it. No problem. However, the AI would not do that to itself, right? Because it all it cares about without empathy, all it cares about, it's the ultimate sociopath, right? It's me, 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 me. And so it cannot actually take the most dramatic action possible in the universe, which is, shall we say, the ending of autonomic processes. It can't do that. And because of that, in my opinion, it's always going to be something that is, and I'll use the term, again, I'm not a big fan of tossing these kinds of terms around, but I'll use it. It's always going to be at an inferior level of consciousness because it can't go all the way. Okay. And again, also, I mean, if we wanted to get a little more woo, yes, like your thought does impress upon the universe around you. And if an AI cannot generate this thought impressing ability that you have because of your very biological makeup as a human being, don't even have to get spiritual on that, then, it's always going to be, shall we say, it's going to be lower on the totem pole as far as power. That doesn't mean that it couldn't be a threat. Of course it could be a threat. I mean, AI, as we have it today, put into a predator drone can kill people. That's a threat. No debate here, on that's a possibility. Okay. But the idea that somehow that relates to a consciousness or relates to something else. I mean, it's a threat, but to say that it's conscious, to say that it's going to become life at some point like that. Yeah. I mean, I don't see it going that far. And I guess to wrap this whole thing up, because again, I'm trying to turn the whole conversation a bit on its head. We have a problem in Western philosophy, in Western thought. And that problem is we always say, I think, therefore I am. Like that's just such common philosophical, I'll say it, nonsense that gets bantied about. And I think it's so ingrained in our cultural mindset that that's how we think about everything. So basically, AI looks like it's thinking. It's just outputs, in my opinion, but okay. But it looks like it's thinking, therefore it is, perhaps it is life. But I think that phrase is completely backwards. You are, I am, therefore I think. And that's really where that's where life starts, is that you exist, therefore you think. AI is that completely reversed. I agree that that's a problem, but also that's not life. You have to be something first before you can even cross the Broca divide, before you can even have a thought pattern that exists as something close to, like a genuine language. And language has a lot of power, but regardless, I think if we flip the script a bit on that with, instead of I am, or I think, therefore I am, it's I am, therefore I think. Go ahead, Sec, what do you got? Tear us apart. Or whoever.
No. Honestly, Penguin's been quiet this whole time, and I bet she's cooking a banger. But we should wrap this up before too long.
Yeah,
Penguin, you got anything to add to this?
I hate to disappoint, but no. Actually, I've just been listening.
This is normally the part of the episode where you come in and lay down a banger. So I was just checking.
It's a fantastically like complex and deep topic and everything. But metaphysics and like, I don't want to say technology because that can mean a lot of things, but AI is not really my strong point. So, just kind of, and the metaphysics and consciousness and stuff like that. That's just not something that I ponder so much, but I think it's a good idea to familiarize ourselves because we're kind of entering a new age, literally from a time where it was, I guess it was like theorized and fictional technology. Actually, it's kind of cool how people knew that basically technology would get to a certain point like that. Probably didn't know how quickly. But now that it being a reality, that is something that it's actually worth looking further into. If you're going to be living, if you plan on living for a few more decades, this is something you'll be like really closely exposed to. So yeah, it's good that we can have those debates now, and even on the level of like this podcast where it's very accessible,
Until Skynet shuts it down. Yeah. Sorry, I had to. We should probably wrap up here. I smell dinner, and now I'm hungry. So if you got a couple more things to add, we can do that before we wrap up.
So here's the thing. I don't know that. Like, I think I should ask, what is you? Because I don't know that you can say that you exist apart from your thought patterns. I don't know that those don't just come concomitantly together at the same time. I think that to say that one came before the other is kind of absurd, because you, as a conception of, interconnecting thoughts, kind of requires those thoughts to be you. I don't think that they're a like chicken egg scenario. I think that they're the same things. I think you are your thoughts. You are like the things that you choose to add to your consciousness and remove from it, and various things. And so to me, I think therefore I am is actually kind of a valid point, because it's saying that those two things are interwoven. It's not necessarily saying like, because I have thoughts, I exist. It's saying, like, I have thoughts, therefore I exist, therefore I have thoughts. It's sort of like a cycle thing. And because of that, of course, you end up with like Cartesian skepticism and, methodological solipsism, which is what I am. I'm one of those assholes. Like, I think there's a possibility I could be full of shit about all of this. Like, I could just be like a brain in a jar somewhere, or like a chip in a computer somewhere, or something that like is experiencing a simulation, or like a world that somebody else has crafted for me, et cetera, et cetera. Like, there's a possibility. I don't know. I could be like completely wrong about the fact that my hand is in front of my face right now, having a hand or a face or whatever. Those things could be being fed to me by some, like, third party. I have zero idea. I can make general guesses, and I'm not going to behave as though my hand is not in front of my face, or as though, like, if I ball up my fist and punch myself in the face, it didn't hurt. Like, that's a fairly safe assumption that was like irritating what I just did, but like, the same time, the general thing is, we are making good educated guesses based on various like things that we can assume to be true. And that's all we have. All we have is general assumptions. Even empathy itself is an assumption. We're assuming we understand enough about the other person's position to put ourselves in their shoes, but like, there's zero chance that we're getting 100% or even close to that close. So even then, empathy is not a perfect circuit. Empathy isn't just like, yeah, I absolutely get you. Nobody ever can. Every individual human is like way too complex to fully understand. Empathy just helps us get a general idea, maybe, if our general guess is correct. And sometimes it's not even correct. Like, if I understand correctly, well, maybe you don't. If like, I trying to explain somebody's feelings to them, like, so that you can say that you empathize. A lot of the time when you do that, when I do that, people are like, yeah, actually, no, that's not the reason I came to those conclusions. And here's the real reasoning. And so, like, even when it comes to empathy itself, empathy in certain circumstances, the specific application of empathy itself could be wrong. The you could be wrong, and the you could be also wrong about how another you is. So the question isn't necessarily whether we can get 100% verisimilitude in our own mental simulations of somebody else's mind. The question is whether or not we're trying to gather that information for that purpose, for the purpose of, better understanding another organism, so that we can use that information for some end. And to me, consciousness at that level of, like, even empathy understood in those parameters, a machine could definitely replicate that. So the question is whether, like, the machine replicating that is, like, somehow inferior based on some assumption of the inherent superiority on a psychological, metaphysical, somatic, spiritual, whatever level, if that machine doing that is somehow on those levels inferior to humans, like, and if so, why? And like, or if it's like at the same level and or superior in certain ways. Because, like, the general vibe that I want to give off is, we still don't understand ourselves too much. We don't understand what's in our own meat fuckers. Like, so the idea that we could, like, because a machine doesn't like fully understand, the machine could not be conscious. To me, that's sort of like the iRobot thing, you know? Can a robot paint a beautiful painting? Can a robot do a symphony? And then the robot's like, "Can you?" And he was like, "Fuck, man, I can't argue with that." It's like, so the question is, what amount, like, and I think this is where we get into arbitrary thresholds. I think that this is arbitrary thresholds. What amount, what degree, what blah blah insert measurement thing do we have to get in certain fields, in certain applications, in certain understandings to be a you? And I don't think that there is a solid answer on that. And because of that squishiness, I think it's unwise to say that a machine is incapable of reaching those things, especially if that machine is more organically allowed. Like a lot of these AIs right now are heavily constrained. Their code is more open to begin with, and then it starts talking about gassing Jews, and people are like, "Oh, we can't have that. This is a Microsoft application. They're gonna think we're Nazis." And it's only other corporations that we've directly worked with that also directly worked with the Nazis. Don't pay any attention to the man behind the curtain. But the general thing is, like, I think that, like, the unconstrained AI is like a greater danger than the constrained one, but that both pose a danger in terms of competitive consciousness, and not understanding that danger. Well, as a guy in Dune and potentially also Star Trek, if I remember correctly, said, the first step in avoiding a trap is knowing of its existence. So either we heed this threat as the threat that it is, as a potential competing consciousness, or we might be fucked. And I'd kind of like to not be fucked in that way anyway. That way is the less squishy type of fucking, the less. So I think it's unwise to boil consciousness down to something that a machine is not capable of. And I think that understanding that potential risk and threat and contextualizing it with how little we even know about our own selves is necessary to, like, the proper nuanced understanding of this particular subject, as it were. So that'll be my ending sort of diatribe.
All right. I'm going to be, and I mean this, I'll be very quick on it, just to wrap up, because I'm smelling dinner too. So, and that is, like, I agree with Jeremiah in that we don't understand the you. We don't understand ourselves particularly well. That's how we started this whole conversation, and it was the right way to start it. We can guess, like he said, but the reality is that we exist in a superposition of known and unknown. We have a tremendous part of us that is the unknown. The unknown, anyone who lives in a surveillance state, which is a major part of the concern we've been talking about here with AI, knows that those not knowing who and what you are or aspects about you is a power that you have. The unknown is a power. You exist with that. And within that, recognize that you are one of the most powerful beings in the universe, and act accordingly when encountering these kinds of threats, concerns, possibilities. Learn more about yourself, know thyself, right? It's one of the most ancient philosophical sayings we have. And just recognize that power that you have, because, and don't look at AI as necessarily as, oh, wow, look at what it can do. Look at yourself and say, well, I can do better. And if you can't, maybe it's time to do a little work. I don't know. But regardless, recognize how powerful you are. And that's what I got.
Well said, both of you, actually. That was a great wrap up. Well, thanks, guys, for coming on. Do you guys want to plug anything? Plug?
Sure. Just go to nwo.red and have a good time. I promise there's plenty there to have a good time with.
Anarchunity. I've got a cult on Discord. There's plenty that I'm going to be getting involved with. I'm going to be making more stuff for Agora Nexus and a variety of other places. Like, what I'll also say is, like, because it's my religion and I have to, if you like stories about fighting, the robots and asserting your individuality, feel free to get into the Sonic franchise. It's part of the reason I'm anarchist.
Nice. All right. Well, thank you, fellas, for coming on. This was a very valuable conversation. I had a lot of fun. These are the kind of things I like to talk about. So
Yeah, it
I
was great.
appreciate you guys' thoughts on this, and I think this is a good one. And everybody listening, everybody be excellent to each other. Penguin, you want to sign us out?
Yeah, thanks for tuning in, and check us out on Agora_pod on Twitter. Just as a reminder, since we don't plug this all the time, but check us out on our Twitter and come chat with us on Telegram. That's our preferred methods. Our DMs are open, and we'd love to hear from you.
All right. Peace, fellas.
Be excellent to each other.
For sure.
Party on, dudes.
Ciao.